Thanks, folks. I'm just going to start off with a comment, and then I'm open to any questions you might have. Today marks the 1-year anniversary of the attack in London, an attack which was Islamophobic, which took the life of the Afzaal family. And a year later, Muslims are asking the question, what has been done to make us feel safer? And sadly, the reality is there has not been any concrete steps to tackle the very clear root causes of Islamophobia that leads to this type of violence. In this case, online hate. There is no bill that's been proposed in 1 year to tackle online hate, which we know is involved in radicalizing the attacker in this particular circumstance, as well as others. There is no one appointed as the special representative to combat Islamophobia, nor has the government taken any steps concretely to dismantle the neo-Nazi group that was linked to this attack. Those are three specific things that could have been done amongst a host of other concrete steps that many Muslim groups have called for. So in light of that, people are really wondering, why hasn't this government taken any concrete measures to keep people safer beyond just expressing concern? The Liberal government needs to take concrete steps, and that's what I'll be asking my questions on today. Why hasn't this government taken those concrete steps? Donc aujourd'hui, je vais poser des questions sur un grand enjeu, le fait qu'aujourd'hui, c'est l'anniversaire 1 an après l'attentat à London qui a tué une famille, la famille Afzaal. C'était un attentat islamophobique. Et après 1 an, le gouvernement libéral n'a pas pris des mesures concrètes pour rendre la communauté musulmane plus sécuritaire. Des exemples, ils n'ont pas démantelé le groupe néo-nazi lié avec cette attaque. Ils n'ont pas proposé un projet de loi pour faire face à la haine en ligne. Ce sont des mesures concrètes pour aider les familles en attaquant les racines de l'islamophobie. Donc, je vais poser la question aujourd'hui, pourquoi le Premier ministre n'a pas pris des mesures concrètes pour rendre la communauté musulmane plus sécuritaire? With that, I'm ready for any questions you might have.
Interesting. So we've seen the parliamentary committees looking at ways to address online extremism. We recently saw the expert task force put together to help guide government policy on coming up with legislation to address online extremism. Can you tell us about where you see the shortfalls in this, or why this isn't enough to address the hatred that resulted in the London attack?
Well, we know it's not a surprise. Online radicalization has happened in the past. The horrific attack in Quebec City at a masjid was also an example where the attacker was radicalized. And we know that online hate is proliferating. We know that, based on the testimony of whistleblowers, that online hate is promoted in the algorithm. The Facebook whistleblower said, we benefit from divisive, corrosive, hateful messages because it creates more response. People stay on the platform longer. That is an indictment of allowing the status quo to continue. We can't let Facebook monitor itself when they promote divisive, hateful rhetoric, which can and has led to online radicalization. So a year after this horrific attack, and years after the previous attack in Quebec, it is simply wrong that the government has taken so long to put anything forward to tackle online hate. We can always start with an immediate measure of some tool for us to remove those type of messages immediately at the federal level with the powers that we have, and then work to find ways to improve that. But the fact that a year later from the attack in London and years after the Quebec City masjid killing, that this is still not something that's being tackled is inexcusable. On top of that, the neo-Nazi group that was linked with the attack could have immediately been targeted and dismantled. There's no excuse for delaying on that. So this is why I point to these concrete examples of how the Liberal government and Prime Minister Trudeau have certainly expressed concern, but haven't really done anything concretely to specifically make sure Muslim communities feel safer. And after hearing of the attack in London, so many Muslims thought, maybe I can't walk the streets with my hijab. Maybe I can't be who I am anymore. Maybe I have to hide who I am. Otherwise, I'm at risk of being attacked or even killed. That's something we can't accept in our country, and we have to make sure that we're doing something about it.
Mr. Singh, I'd like to ask you about the parliamentary agenda. We're into June, usually about 3 weeks left, and sometimes this time of year things move fairly quickly at the end. There's a battle going on about C11, the Online Streaming Act. From your perspective, what are the priority bills you want to see get passed before the summer recess?
Well, we want to make sure that the bills that Canadians have been promised, the things that we know that need to get done to make sure people are better off, are passed as quickly as possible. We've laid out really clearly that we are prepared to accelerate bills that will respond to what people need. We're not interested in what we've seen in the past, which is an announcement around something important and then a lot of delay in actually bringing it forward or passing it. So if there are priorities to pass bills that will make lives better for Canadians, we're ready to do that. We've offered our support to make that happen.
Monsieur Singh, sur la haine en ligne, vous dites que ça va pas assez vite. Le gouvernement a annoncé un groupe d'experts il y a quand même quelques semaines qui est en train de se pencher là-dessus. Donc, est-ce que ce que vous dites, c'est non, on a déjà assez d'avis d'experts, il faut tout de suite déposer un projet de loi? Est-ce que c'est ça que vous dites?
Il y a un an, après un attentat à London, pourquoi il a pris un an pour avoir des experts? Pourquoi pas, il y a un an, commencer le travail avec des experts tout de suite après cet attentat? Il n'y a pas une excuse pour attendre un an de prendre le temps de parler avec les experts pour avoir un projet de loi. Quand on sait la radicalisation en ligne était une cause pour, dans les deux cas, l'attentat à Québec, dans le masjid et aussi dans ce cas. Donc, non, il n'y a pas d'excuse pour prendre un an d'effectivement commencer le travail. On aurait dû avoir un projet de loi tout de suite pour enlever les messages haineux, divisifs sur les plateformes de médias sociaux.
Just to follow up on that point, though, there was a draft bill circulated, and it was Muslim groups themselves who said, hold on a minute, this is a bad bill, start over. And so that's what happened, that's the delay.
Well, the fact that they took that long to come up with a draft, for that draft bill to be presented to the Muslim community, and now we're still a year later, there's still no excuse. I mean, to move that slowly when we know online hate is real, online hate is radicalizing people to commit acts of violence, I would think that waiting a year is completely wrong, and people would see that that's completely wrong to wait that long. I mean, this should be a priority. It should be moved along very quickly. People are left after a year seeing no real concrete difference in their lives, thinking, well, how is this being taken seriously? Like, does that sound like a serious timeline after someone has been, a whole family was wiped out by someone that was radicalized online, after a gunman walked into a mosque and shot at people because he was radicalized online? Like, that does not sound to me like urgency. And I would debate with anybody who claims that that is in any way respectful, urgent response to such a crucial, serious problem.
Can I ask you on C-19? I don't know if you've seen my reporting this morning, but some people are expressing concerns about the beefed up sanctions powers, the new powers to seize and sell off assets held that are owned by Russians to help with the financing of reconstruction in Ukraine. People are saying this might be a violation of international law. Did the NDP realize that this was potentially contrary to international law when it gave its support for this? Are you concerned about it? Should it have come up at committee? And will you be doing anything about that in these final stages of passing this budget legislation?
Well, there's no question in my mind that given the facts that we have before us, that Russia is engaged in this illegal, offensive attack and war on Ukraine, that in order to put some clear barriers or use some of the tools that we have to deter this, that seizing and freezing assets is freezing and seizing assets is absolutely something we have to do. And then to sell those assets off so that we can actually provide more support to Ukraine is the right thing to do. To make sure that laws are in good order with international laws is the work of Parliament. We need to make sure that happens. But there's no question about the idea that we should absolutely be freezing the assets of oligarchs that are supporting Putin, and then once we freeze those assets, seizing them, and then finding a way to recuperate by selling or otherwise, to use that as resources towards helping Ukraine is the right thing to do. And making sure that it works internationally is something that we should always be aware of.
But it seems that work hasn't been done, and the way the law is written right now might actually violate UN articles. You're okay with that? You're prepared to stand and vote in favor of that?
There's no question I'm opposed to the war in Ukraine, and that I want to do everything possible to put sanctions on Russia. And if that involves seizing and freezing assets, absolutely, and selling them off, absolutely. And we'll figure out moving forward why the government didn't take into consideration international laws, but it's the right thing to do.
Sur les armes de poing, on voit là, que depuis l'annonce de lundi passé du projet de loi C20, depuis le dépôt C21, pardon, il y a des tireurs sportifs là, qui se précipitent pour acheter des armes de poing. Est-ce que ça vous inquiète de voir ça? Et vous, au NPD, qu'est-ce que vous pouvez faire pour assurer que le gel d'armes de poing va être adopté rapidement?
Ce qu'on a vu à plusieurs reprises avec le gouvernement libéral, le gouvernement fait une annonce sur une question qui est populaire, une question qui est importante, mais c'est seulement une annonce. Et après, les actions ne sont pas là. On a vu la même chose avec l'ancien projet de loi sur les armes d'assaut, qu'ils ont promis de faire quelque chose, et ce qu'ils ont présenté n'était pas exactement ce qu'ils avaient promis, et leurs actions étaient tellement lentement. Et il a pris trop de temps pour mettre en œuvre un projet de loi. Dans ce cas, on a aussi dit, si le gouvernement vraiment veut faire face à la violence causée par les armes de poing, et si le gouvernement veut vraiment avoir un projet de loi qui rendra le Canada et les Canadiennes plus sécuritaires, on est prêt d'accélérer ce projet de loi rapidement pour rendre en comité, pour faire le travail nécessaire pour effectivement, le but, c'est toujours de rendre les Canadiens plus sécuritaires. Mais si c'était seulement une annonce pour gagner d'appui, mais pas de prendre des mesures concrètes, on peut voir ça si le gouvernement choisit d'accepter notre aide, d'accélérer ce processus. Sinon, c'est encore un autre exemple de le gouvernement qui veut faire des grandes annonces, mais qui ne veut pas faire le travail nécessaire pour rendre les Canadiens plus sûrs.
Voulez-vous que ça soit adopté d'ici la fin de la session parlementaire? Est-ce que vous êtes prêt si c'est possible que ça soit...
Oui, bien sûr. On est prêt d'accélérer les processus pour qu'ils puissent être passés dans cette session. Mais encore, c'est une question pour le gouvernement libéral s'il veut vraiment accélérer le processus ou non.
Last
Well,
question.
Mr. Singh, we've seen China say...
Wait, did you get one? Sorry?
I didn't yet.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, absolutely. Just to my colleague's point earlier, this isn't really a question of whether you're opposed to the war in Ukraine. We've been really clear on that all the time. But the spirit of the UN article seems to be that it's the international community's obligation to freeze the assets in order to inflict some sort of a punishment and then to return them. So do you think that Canada ought to violate that?
I think that Canada should take the most severe forms of sanction possible, and that includes not just seizing and freezing and seizing these assets, but selling them off to fund Ukraine. I think is the right thing to do. I support that, and I think the international community can get behind that as well. Thanks. Merci.
Thank you.